I decided to bring in Aaron Sparrow on this when I said, hey, listen, we need to watch Thor Love and Thunder. I've heard it's atrocious. It can't be that bad, can it? Aaron reluctantly agreed to it, and we're here to talk about it. How you doing, Aaron?
Well, I don't know how I'm doing. Am I your new Doc? Like, you can't use Doc anymore because he won't read new comics. He's just done. And so now you're like, hey, how can I torture Aaron? Let me make him watch this god-awful film.
At least it's only 2 hours instead of the normal 3-hour MCU movies that we're getting these days. So it was like an hour shorter than normal.
Yeah, I hear it's not as excruciating as Eternals was.
I've heard nothing but bad things about Eternals. We're not going to go there because I don't care about the Eternals. But I do like Thor. And I must say there are a couple of things I want to get out of the way up front and early that I actually like about the movie. There's a lot I don't like, but there are a couple of things that I thought really work. Specifically, number one is the opening scene establishing Gore the God Butcher. Once I realized that he wasn't, in fact, the really shitty version of Deadpool from that Wolverine Origins movie, and we get the establishment of the motivations, the way the gods are mocking the death of Gore's people and his daughter specifically, and him getting the necro sword and killing the god and all that stuff. I actually thought that was done pretty well. It was a little bit goofy, but it made sense for the moment that was happening and what Gore had been through. I was kind of impressed.
That opening scene feels like it's from a different movie once you watch the rest of it. You're kind of like, okay, we're going to get something that's somewhat serious, but it's just not treated that way through the rest of the film. I do like a lot of things about that opening scene. I don't like the design of Gore. I don't like the fact that they didn't go with a more comic book design, a more alien design. Christian Bale's performance is good. He's trying in a real bad movie. So I appreciated that. I do think it was kind of dumb that the Necro Sword is just right there. Obviously, it just felt like Taika Waititi didn't really have any interest in this Gore the God Butcher story. This was something that he was handed. And so he was just kind of tacking it on to the things that he really wanted to do, which was a bunch of goofy shit with screaming goats.
All right, we're going to get to that part, but I thought that was pretty well done. I was like, hey, this is kind of serious. The other thing, shockingly, that I thought was done reasonably well in this movie, certainly stood out as good compared to the rest of the Drek, is the Jane Foster Thor story itself. I thought it was pretty poignant. What it did better than the comic books played it out far too long. It needed to be a single story that ended with the death of Jane Foster. It happens in this movie, and I almost felt like there was chemistry between Chris Hemsworth and Natalie Portman, especially when she lets him know that she has cancer, and he's kind of professing his love for her and everything like that. It almost felt like the two had chemistry together, like they had a romance at one point in time and they loved each other. So I was surprised because generally speaking, I don't like the Jane Foster Thor story in comics because it went on too long, but it never wore out its welcome here. And I will say this, they treated Jane Foster like a real superhero in this story, which they don't do with Chris Hemsworth.
It's another case of we're going to prop up this hero by dragging down the hero that you know. No, I think that Jane Foster was handled as well as could be. I think that Natalie Portman, it looked like she was having fun in the role, which I don't know that she did in Dark World. It really looked like she wasn't having any fun there. But in the first Thor, it looked like she was having some fun. I think there was a little bit of chemistry between her and Thor in that first movie, even though he had those eyebrows. But in this one, I kind of felt it again, and it felt like kind of a reconnection. I think the big issue that it kind of struggled with is when you bring a character back who hasn't been in the movies for several years, and then you have to kind of reestablish that. It could have really been clumsy, and it could have really not worked. But surprisingly, it was pulled off pretty well.
The big problem, obviously, well, there's a bigger problem, but one of the big problems is Thor himself, Chris Hemsworth. He has a lot of charm. He's very good with comedic timing. He's got a lot of charisma, and all those things shine through in this movie. But he is used so poorly. It's the same story we've been told over and over again, and he's basically just used as a prop for gags and punchlines throughout the movie and never treated seriously like they do treat Jane Foster. And I did not like that at all.
No, I didn't care for that, especially after, my favorite moment in Infinity War is when there's a couple of them, and they're all tied into Thor. Where he talks about how he has nothing left to lose, I think is really a heartbreaking moment. And it really shows that Chris Hemsworth can really get you on board with him, with his charisma And when he shows back up on the battlefield in Wakanda, that's the best moment of the movie for me. I still, to this day, get chills at that moment where he shows up and he says, "Bring me Thanos." And he flies up into the air and the lightning's crackling all around him. And it's like, oh my God, this is the comic book Thor brought to life. And he comes down and like hits the ground and, you know, all the guys get wiped out. That's the Thor that I want. I want the Viking kick-ass, you know, warrior Thor. And we keep going back to this goofball Thor that, because Taika Waititi has the, you know, sense of humor Chris Hemsworth described of a 7-year-old. And it just gets so tiresome, and it's such a disservice to a great character and to an actor that I think can really pull off a variety of different takes. You know, I think that you do Chris Hemsworth a disservice when you just make him a big dumb goofball, because he can do those serious moments really well. He can do those big heroic moments really well. And this film does not give him any of those to work with, really.
Not really. And there's a couple of running gags that I found to be very off-putting. The first one are the screaming goats. I don't think I ever even got mild amusement, let alone an actual laugh about that ongoing gag. The second one is the jealous nature of Stormbreaker. Now that Mjolnir's back, and Thor is showing a little bit of interest in Mjolnir, and then obviously with Zeus's lightning bolt, it's jealous of what Thor is seeing in the other hammers and stuff. Maybe it was funny like the first time, but it goes on over and over and over. It's just like really stupid, not funny, you know, slapstick third grade humor.
It's ridiculously stupid, and it doesn't belong in a film where you've got a character like Gore the God Butcher. This should have been a very serious take, and instead it was just It just ruined that whole character, and it ruined that whole storyline. And again, another disservice done to one of the actors, a disservice done to Christian Bale, who I think was trying really hard to bring some gravitas to that role.
Christian Bale is certainly hamming it up, because at one point I think he figures out that they're not going to treat the character seriously. He's not going to have enough screen time. He's basically just a really spooky ghost after that big opening scene, which I thought was really well done. And he rolls with it, and you can see there's so much more meat on the bone of that character, so much left to accomplish with Gore the God Butcher in this movie that is left on the cutting room table because Taika Waititi had to take 25 minutes and go make fun of Zeus, which we're going to get to here in a moment.
It's sad because, you know, I've met Taika Waititi. It was right before Ragnarok came out. And at the time he seemed like a really, humble and kind of like, really kind of like introspective guy. Like, we talked about like one of my favorite movies, which is What We Do in the Shadows. Absolutely love that film. I've liked his other stuff. I like Jojo Rabbit, Hunt for the Wilder People. I've enjoyed his things that are kind of like his, and he can put those stamp on his things. But it's like when you're stepping into something like Thor, and I say this about comic books all the time, you can't come onto a comic and say, well, how do I tell my stories with the Fantastic Four? You have to say to yourself, what kind of Fantastic Four stories can I tell? And I feel like he doesn't come into it with that kind of love and that kind of interest in the character, and he turns it into something it's not to amuse himself. Well, you have a responsibility. You have a responsibility to the character. You have a responsibility to the creators of that character, to the fans of that character, and to make the studio money. And you failed on all of those fronts.
Yeah, it turned out Thor Love and Thunder, while it did have a pretty big opening weekend, fell off quite dramatically once people realized this was a lot like Thor Ragnarok, but without the good story and way too much Taika Waititi humor in here. The worst example being the scene with Zeus, which is basically like, I think 20 minutes, and almost nothing is accomplished whatsoever. It's just a bunch of jokes. They do gain access to Zeus's lightning bolt, so that was accomplished. And they do learn that Gore the God Butcher is searching for eternity to kill off all the gods in one fell swoop. Although Zeus doesn't really seem to take this very seriously, even though he knows that this guy is out there killing gods. But the portrayal of Zeus by Russell Crowe is one of the most cringe-inducing things I've ever seen in a movie, period. I've never seen anyone, like a character this powerful, be taken less seriously than we see in this movie. At one point, he appears to be pirouetting around like in a mini skirt, like he's a ballerina or something. He speaks like the two gay dudes from the Soup Nazi episode in Seinfeld when they end up stealing the furniture and all that stuff. And it was just like the worst example of excess and not funny that Taika Waititi has brought to the MCU. And I fucking hated every single second of that scene.
No, I absolutely did too. And you're throwing away so much. they're just throwing away now so many things that could be good and that could be epic. We saw it with She-Hulk with like the Wrecking Crew, and we're seeing it here with like Zeus and the gods. There's so much great story content that you could mine there, but you can tell that it's in the hands of a filmmaker who's just not interested in it. He's not interested in the Gore the God Butcher storyline. He's not interested in the Greek gods and how they might fit into the larger MCU. He's just a guy smashing action figures together and then throwing them on the ground when he's done with them, and because he doesn't actually care about any of this. It's kind of the problem. Like I said, when I met him, he seemed like he was still on the, he hadn't really hit it big in Hollywood. He'd had some success, some independent success, and he seemed like a nice, humble guy. And then you look at him in interviews after this, and he just seems like he's so full of himself and just so convinced of his own genius. And I think that really hurt this product.
Like I said, almost nothing is accomplished for a full 20 minutes in a 2-hour movie. They could have used those 20 minutes to flesh out Gore the God Butcher, to really establish that character as a bigger threat. They could have more fully fleshed out the relationship between Jane Foster and Thor. There are a lot of things that they could have done. They could have done anything with Valkyrie, who's basically an afterthought in this entire movie, which isn't the worst thing in the world. I don't particularly like that character, but they could have done something. They could have tried to do anything to make any of these characters important.
I've heard that Russell Crowe was doing an impression of some Australian personality. And it's like, yeah, that's great. Nobody knows who that is except people in Australia.
Well,
nobody cares. Yeah. And it's like, but it's like, okay. All right. So you decided to do this. And yeah, wouldn't it have been great if they'd used that 20 minutes to flesh out Gore? Wouldn't it have been great if we could have actually seen Gore kill another god? We could have seen the threat that he actually possessed. In the comic book, Gore has been doing this for a very long time. And, there's so many gods that he's cutting his way through, throughout the millennia. And that's what makes it interesting. That's what makes it compelling. In this film, he's killed like his god and that's it. But now he's got this big reputation of like killing gods that we never get to see on the screen. We never get to see any of the brutality. We never get to see any of the horror. I understand that this is a film made for general audiences, but with the types of jokes that are in there, and then like Thor getting his clothes blown off so that we see his ass, is that for kids?
Tattoos, yes.
Yeah, it's just ridiculously stupid, and it devalues the character, it devalues the property, and it devalues the whole MCU. And Phase 4 has done such a terrible job of just denigrating everything that came before and making it not matter. From there being desk drawers full of Infinity Stones at the TVA on the Loki TV show, to this stupid wish plot. Oh my God, the wish plot! Stop letting people do wishes as a plot. It didn't work in Wonder Woman 1984. It doesn't work here. Oh, if you find eternity, you get a magic wish. Okay, well, why didn't Thanos just do that? The problem with these big, and here's this new MacGuffin, and here's this new MacGuffin. You have to make it make sense within the context of what has already gone before. But they're just throwing these things at the wall, and it doesn't matter, and they obviously don't care. And I think it's because I think Feige has been promoted maybe too high, and I think a lot of these things are in the hands of Victoria Alonso, and it doesn't seem like she's up to the task of carrying the torch of the MCU. Phase 4 has just been a complete disaster.
There are a couple of things here and there that I actually quite like about it, but for the most part, I don't know if this is the worst movie in the history of the MCU, but it very well may be. There's a really bad scene at the end with all the kids getting powered up, and they're just all of a sudden superheroes. Like, you don't need training or anything like that to destroy Gore and all the things that he can conjure up and all this stuff. And I don't know, man. What did you think? Is this the worst MCU movie you've ever seen?
Oh, man. Well, I haven't seen Eternals. So
it's in the running.
And so I would say that it's probably one of my least favorite, if not the worst MCU movie. I think it just breaks too many things, but it's all par for the course with Phase 4. Phase 4 has just broken everything, and I don't see this as being any different. I didn't go see it. I didn't plan on seeing it, but you asked me to do it, and I suffered through it for the show, but. It's just one of those things. I'm kind of done with the MCU. It's like it's not a buffet that I care to grab everything from anymore. It's just I'll go and I'll pick up one like particular thing here or there maybe. But for the most part, the MCU pretty much ended with Endgame for me. I enjoyed No Way Home. That's the only thing that's come out since Endgame that I've really been into. Oh, you know what? I liked Werewolf by Night well enough. That was a nice little one-off. But that's it.
If you are not a fan of Thor: Love and Thunder, I've got bad news for you. The future of the MCU is real. It's happening, and it's getting worse every single month. Thor: Love and Thunder is the future of the MCU. It's absolutely terrible. Definitely check out this video where I break it all down in full before the movie ever came out. Definitely check this out. If you don't see it here, there's a link in the video description.